I'm really more than excited to actually be presenting this training to you. Bystander intervention to stop police-sponsored violence and anti-Black racist harassment. So our goal today, or our mission today, is to have you leave this training ready to safely, and please underline, circle, exclamation point, safely intervene when you see police-sponsored violence or anti-Black racist behavior happening in public spaces, right? So my name is Vanessa Miller. I don't know how much more I can add from that wonderful introduction that I was given, but just a little bit. I am the senior trainer at Hollerback, and this training in particular just resonates with me on so many levels. I identify as an African-American woman. My partner is a Black man. I have a Black family and I have Black children. And I can honestly tell you, it's when my kids, and they're grown, they're adults, and when they go out sometimes in the world, I do have concerns as to what it is that they're going to walk into, right? I say a prayer that they'll safely return, right? Because I know that the level of education, how well-mannered they are, how confident they are, doesn't matter, because none of those things are going to protect them, right? None of those things are going to protect them from being added to the names of other Black and brown people who have died unjustly, right? And for me, that's kind of, in a sense, that's scary, right? I envision a world where, regardless of the color of skin, regardless of gender identity, regardless of those beautiful things that make us different, that also bring us together, that we all are free to be able to walk and move around in the world and be comfortable in the identities that we have embraced. So just a little bit about Hollerback. Hollerback is a people-powered movement to end harassment in all of its forms. We have on our website and through our apps have collected over 18,000 stories of harassment. And the one good thing that in reading all of those stories that seem to be common is that when people intervened, when people actually stepped up to help. So we've actually created a whole training around that called the 5 Ds of bystander intervention, which I'm going to introduce you to in this training. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we are going to talk about what police-sponsored violence and anti-Black racist harassment looks like, right? We're going to learn, again, that word safely intervene to stop police-sponsored violence and anti-Black racist harassment when we see it. And also we're going to practice the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. So just a couple of things before we actually get into the meat of the training is we are going to be talking about racism and police brutality, right? And I do recognize, understand, and honor that this can be triggering for people. So please, 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 please practice self-care. This training is centered on Black, and I'm going to add brown lives. This is how you can be an ally in keeping these lives safe. And as you were already told, we're going to be doing some polling. Please respond. The polls are anonymous. We are not going to know who you are. And please, any questions that you have, please put them in the chat. I love comments. Okay? So we are going to get started with an activity. Black, white, yellow, red. They're all colors. Constructed color levels that carry great meaning in this society and have also been used to determine the value and the humanity believed and extended to specific communities. These labels are used within this country to enforce and create structures that uphold racism. These color labels have established some groups as inferior to others. These color labels have reduced us to states of thinking and acting based on a system of constructed inferiority that has had allowed harm to come to those groups. So in this activity, we're going to examine how this racial construct of color has or has not provided privilege. And the name of this activity is it's called Put Your Finger Down. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to hold up 10 fingers if you can, 10 digits, whether it's fingers, toes, or if you want to use a paper and pen to mark it down, that's perfectly fine. As I read a statement, I'm going to ask you to put a finger down. Okay, so y'all still with me out there? Okay, yes, all right. Okay, remember, I love comments, so keep them coming. Okay, so here we go. Put a finger down if you've been called a racial slur. Put a finger down if you have been followed around a store unnecessarily. Put a finger down if someone has crossed the street to avoid passing you. Put a finger down if you've ever seen somebody clench their purse as you were coming near them or in an elevator with them. Put a finger down if you've had someone step off an elevator, a train, a car, or any form of transportation to avoid riding with you. Put a finger down if you've been accused of not being able to afford something expensive. Put a finger down if you've had fear in your heart when being followed by the police. Put a finger down if you've never been given a pass on a citation that you deserved. Put a finger down if you've ever been stopped or detained by the police for no valid reason. Put a finger down if you've been bullied solely based on your race. Put a finger down if you've ever been denied service based on the color of your skin. Put a finger down if you've ever had to teach your children how not to get killed by the police. So I invite you in the chat box to just tell me how many fingers do you still have up? I think I had about 2, 3, 4, no fingers. 8, 2, 1, 3, 2, right? Okay, 6 and up. Thank you. So first of all, thank you all for sharing that with me in the chat box. So the reason that I start this training off with this exercise is because I really want us all to come into this space, into this training with the idea of what privilege we may or may not hold just based solely on the color of our skin, and how just this one aspect of our identity can impact and influence how we experience the world and how the world views us, right? And please know this, if you had many fingers left, or if you had none, or you had somewhere in between, it doesn't mean you're better than any other human being or any less than any other human being. What it does mean, though, is that you have an identity and maybe experiences that have prioritized your story in the world and in your culture. So we all experience public spaces differently, right? And that's really based on how we identify, right? And one of the ways we identify or are identified is the color of our skin. So the goal and the role of this training is to really talk to you about your role as a bystander. I know that in Black and Brown communities, that sometimes may find ourselves targets in many situations, especially when dealing with the police, and that we may have some genuine concerns about intervening with the police because the risk is so high, right? And it's also important to acknowledge that many people have different identities, experience public spaces dramatically different from each other, and that may be the result of privilege. Privilege is a set of unearned benefits and power maintained by a group in society. And in addition to race and ethnicity, it extends to all parts of our identity: gender, gender expression, gender identity, class, language, ability, and many, many others. But here's the thing: your privilege and your identity can change depending on the situation that you're in. And in some places and in some spaces, your privilege may give you more power than others. And what that means is that you might be able to help in a way that maybe someone else cannot. Right? Now, in the next couple of slides, I want to share some statistics with you. In this country, a Black person is 3.73 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white person is, despite approximately equal rates of use. Black people are 28% of those killed by police in 2020, despite being only 13% of the population. That's more than double the numbers in the population. Seven out of 10 Black people say they were treated less fairly than whites in their dealings with police. Now, something else I want you to think about as I shared those statistics, right? Please hear me. I am not saying that people don't need to be brought to justice. People need to be brought to justice regardless of their color, regardless of their gender. What I'd like for you to think about is why. Why the disparity, right? This is not a crusade against law enforcement, nor am I saying that all law enforcement is bad. I'm sure many of us on this call, and I'm actually raising both of my hands, have loved ones, family members, friends who are all part of law enforcement. What I am saying, and please hear this, what I am saying is that there are those in law enforcement, and there are those that are not in law enforcement that have allowed their own biases and racist ideas about Black and brown people and the communities that they live in to fuel their reasons to harass and harm. There's a video on YouTube, and I just want to share this with you really quickly, because it kind of leads into what we're going to talk about here. There's this video on YouTube that Dr. King gave roughly about 11 months before his assassination, right? It was, so that's roughly about 50 some odd, almost 50 years ago, if my math is right, right? And I'm going to just paraphrase some of the things that were said there. So in this video, he was asked, and this is the question: why is it that the Negro, and this is the words of the interviewer, are looking for an excuse? Why is it that the Negro is looking for an excuse? Why is it that every other immigrant group that came to America was able to succeed? It wasn't easy, but they did. Is it because they're Black? And King's answer said, that's a big part of it. What King said is that when African people, first of all, African people were the only people brought to this country that were enslaved, brought here against their will. And what that did was depersonalize. They were looked at as less than people, thingified, weren't even thought of as people in many cases. stigmatize the color of their skin. And what those intentional, purposeful, willful acts did was to create bias that's still in existence today. A lot of the harassment that we see around Black and brown people is centered in bias. And bias is a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way that's considered unfair. And bias can show up in basically two ways. It can be explicit or outward, which means that the person who has it expresses it directly. They know that they have this attitude and it operates consciously. And then there's this other bias, implicit bias, right? This bias is more inward. A person who has implicit bias may not be aware that they have this attitude and it operates subconsciously. But here's the thing with implicit bias. Implicit bias can influence our thinking. Implicit bias can influence our behaviors. Implicit bias can influence our actions, right? For example, let's go back to some of the statements I read in the activity, being followed around in the store, right? Being said that you cannot afford something that's expensive, right? So these are some of the ways that implicit bias can actually show up. So here's some examples when we're talking about Black and brown communities. These are some examples of what we're talking about when we're talking about bias, right? So who's at risk, right? Who's at risk? Who is it specifically that I'm talking about in this training today? So, and I said this before, and I'm going to say it again, African people were the only people who were forcibly removed from their land and enslaved when and brought to this land. The institution of slavery in America created biases and stereotypes about Black and brown people that are still believed and practiced to this day. And even after the Emancipation Proclamation, they were giving nothing for all of the free labor and endured abuse. 14th Amendment made African Americans and all those born in the US soil citizens, yet that did not stop the harm of Black bodies. So let's be abundantly clear. When I am talking about Black people, I am not just talking about Black people that were born in this country, right? I'm talking about the entire Black community, those from the Caribbean, South America, Europe, Africa, because the reality is that the color of your skin in this country sadly dictates how some people perceive you and will treat you based on that perception. And there may be some of you on this call saying, well, you know what, Vanessa, I don't see color. We're all the same. And what I'd like for you to think about, if that's something that you say, is that statement implies that everyone has had or has the same opportunities and accesses to resources. And that's simply not the case in this country for Black and brown people. And it also further implies that you're not seeing the injustices and the inequalities, as well as the richness and the vibrancy that the people of African descent bring and have brought to this country. And as Verna Myers says, right, the problem was never seeing the color of a person's skin. The problem is how that person is treated based on the color of their skin. So I'm going to launch our first poll here. And this first poll is basically, what examples of police-sponsored violence and anti-Black racist harassment have you either experienced or witnessed? Hold on, because my poll just went screwy, so bear with me. Okay, there we go. So racial profiling, verbal harassment, being approached or pulled over by the police without reason, being followed around in a store or building, being denied services, being accused of committing a crime, or maybe you've even seen some physical violence. Right, so I'm just going to give you all a couple of seconds to answer that. Let's see, right? So there we go. So I want to share this so you all can see this, right? Can you all see? You can see the results, okay? Okay, all right. So I think one of the things that's interesting here is not one of these things have not been checked, right? Not one of those things has not been checked. So what that's saying to me is that we all have an idea of what it looks like, either through the fact that we've experienced it, right? And if you are, and if you have, I'm sorry you had to go through that, or that you've witnessed it. So thank you all for participating in that. So this spectrum of racism towards the Black community. Hold on, there we go. So this spectrum of racism towards Black and brown communities, right? So if you read it from left to right, you might say that you're looking at an increase in the level of harm, and you'd be correct. Here's something else to think about. What we've done in this country is normalize racist behavior and anti-Black behaviors. We've kind of normalized shaming and hating people because of the color of their skin. We've normalized racial slurs. We've normalized appropriating Black culture and not respecting Black people, Black and brown people. And this has been done for so long and so much. Is it really any surprise that you see the brutalization and the murder of Black bodies? No matter where the act falls on this spectrum, all of these acts are harmful. All of these acts are harmful. And when we have a society that allows for any form of racism and disrespect to exist, it creates an environment for more severe forms of racism and disrespect and harassment to proliferate. And it's the accumulation of these aggressions that can cause harm physically, psychologically, and emotionally. And they can manifest internally and externally, not only in the well-being of Black people, it can manifest in the well-being of all people. And it can affect how not only Black people view themselves, but also how other people view Black people, Black and brown people. So these acts of aggression, harassment, and racism, they are internalized in our minds and in our bodies. The internalization of these aggressions, this harassment, the racism affects our interpersonal relationships, how we interact with each other. Which then in turn affects our larger systems, our organizations. Impacts our communities. and shapes public policy, how it's created, and who is impacted. So the impact of all of these acts have a ripple effect that go up from the individual to interpersonal relationships, to our organizations, to our communities, to public policies, and then it comes back down again like a cycle. Racism, bias, and anti-Black harassment permeates Black and Brown lives in the communities that they live in. COVID-19 has had a disproportionate effect on those communities, not having access to the same resources and care that maybe other communities have, right? There's a saying, and I don't know if you've heard it, when America gets a cold, Black people get the flu. And I think that that says it all. So what we're going to see on the next couple of slides is how the internalization of the inferiority of Black and Brown people have contributed to their mistreatment and the use of systems as weapons against them. So we're going to start here. This might be one you're familiar with. This was actually in the newspaper, Christian Cooper, bird watching in Central Park. They have a leash law with dogs. He approached a white woman, asked her to put a dog on a leash. She got upset, told him that she was going to call the police, which she did, and say that she was being threatened by an African-American man. Here's one maybe you may not be so familiar with. Kayla Moore. A wellness check ended in her death. Kayla Moore was a Black trans woman living with schizophrenia. She was killed by the Berkeley Police Department. She was having a mental health crisis. They wrestled her to the ground, placed her under arrest. 6 officers restrained her using their full weight until she stopped breathing. Philip Evans, right? Putting groceries in his car, right? White woman called 911, said he was acting suspicious. When he was interviewed after the police came, he was like, only thing that I could think of is I'm Black, I've got a nice car, and I'm in a white neighborhood. Kurt Reinhold, he was killed by police who accused him of jaywalking. Roxanne Moore, another Black transgender woman, was shot 16 times by Philadelphia police. She was having a mental health episode. Manuel Ellis, he actually died 2 weeks before George Floyd. He was being strained by police and he said, "I can't breathe." Tanisha Anderson, she died while police placed their knee in her back. She was also having a mental health episode. Ahmaud Arbery, out for a jog, thought he was trying to rob people. He was shot and killed. I hope y'all can see my face because we all know what happened here. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. This isn't new. This has been something that's been happening for quite some time, and it keeps happening. Black and Brown people have had the police called on them for simply sleeping in the common room in the college, barbecuing in a park. Right? And we have lost so many lives to police and anti-Black violence. Here's a list. This is a decade. This is through May 31st, 2020. right? And I'm sure that list doesn't even have all of the names because it ends May 2020, right? Tamir Rice was playing in the park. Michelle Cassell was changing the lock on her door when the police arrived to take her to a mental health facility. Philandro Castile was driving home for dinner. Botham Jean was eating ice cream in his living room. Right? And the list goes on and on and on and on. So my next poll question for you is, how many of these impacts of state-sponsored violence and racial harassment do you recognize? So just bear with me while I launch this second one. Can you all see it?
I just relaunched the poll. I think.
Oh,
people should be
thank
able
you.
to
So
see
do I need to close this one? The one
I,
that I
th-
have
I
on?
think you're. I think you're good. Leave it there.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
for that, because I was like, okay, what am I doing?
We got it. Teamwork.
Makes the dream work. Okay, now I see it. Okay. All righty. So here we go. Right? Let's see. Physical health issues, isolation and disconnect from community, trauma, PTSD, depression, anxiety, feeling less likely to pursue opportunities for work or education because of racism, right? I know people who left fields because of how they were treated. How about community quality of life? Policies that target Black communities like social distancing enforcement, enforcement and stop and frisk. I'm just going to give you all another few minutes to answer that, but I also think it's interesting, and I'm going to share them with you in a few minutes, that just like the first poll I launched, all of them are checked. So I'm going to share this. We stopped it. Okay, so look at that, right? All of them are checked. So the idea here is for us to really gain an understanding and awareness of the impacts that this behavior can have on not only Black and Brown people, but also on their communities as well, right? I want to share a story here with you about Khalif Browder, right? He was arrested, I believe it was in 2010, and he was 16 years old for a robbery that he didn't commit. He spent more than 1,000 days. And for those of you that are trying to do the math, that is almost 3 years waiting for a trial that never happened. And most of those 3 years, he spent in solitary confinement. He endured mistreatment by officers and inmates while he was in Rikers Island. So when he was released, he had panic and anxiety attacks. He was hospitalized for depression. He was given drugs to help him cope. Long story short, he committed suicide in his parents' home. Right? Now that's just one story, right? Physical and mental health, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, suicidal ideation, suicide, right? Social and financial, not going certain areas, not going to certain neighborhoods, right? Maybe leaving a job, or maybe even not pursuing a job or an opportunity because of the racism, right? Community. So even if a person has never experienced this, a Black or brown person has never personally experienced it, knowing that this can happen can make you feel unsafe. Right? And then we talk about policy, right? There was I want to say it was last summer in news, not Newsday, in the Post, when we first started implementing the social distancing or enforcing the social distancing and the mask requirements. There's two pictures side by side that they had in the article. One picture, you had what appeared to be a group of white people, and you had an officer that was sitting in the park come up to them and give them a mask, right? In the other picture, you have a group of officers, and they look like undercover officers, no mask, sitting on the head of what appears to be a Black man. And when they were questioned as to what was happening, well, he didn't have on a mask. So I say that to say, when we think about policies, right, it's sometimes how those policies are actually enforced, right? And the impacts that the enforcement of those policies can create, right? All of these are cumulative, and they run deep within the being of a Black and brown person, as well as undermine the ability to live and to maneuver in society. Oh, you remember that? Somebody remembers that. So I'm assuming you're talking about the story I shared with Khalif Browder, and I see the heartbreak. Yeah, yeah. Yes, he killed himself, sad but true. Because it is all because of the color of your skin, sad but true. Thank you. Okay, so that all brings us to this point in our training, right? Bystander intervention, a proven methodology. And here's some things I want to share with you. In many, many ways, this is really something that we are actually doing. Think about times when maybe someone's dropped something and you've picked it up for them, right? Or think about when we were in buildings, when we were all in office buildings and someone's running for the elevator and they say, hold the door, and you're frantically looking for that button to hold the door open, or you're putting your hand between the elevator doors so they don't close, right? So this, in a sense, are things that we already do. The challenge may be in what to do when we see this particular type of behavior happening. And that's the beauty behind the 5Ds, because they give us the tools, and there's 5, to actually safely intervene when we see this type of behavior happening. At Hollaback, we call them the 5Ds of bystander intervention. And I'm going to go through each and every one of them very, very briefly for you now. So the first one is distract. And this is, just like it sounds, creating a distraction to de-escalate the situation. The next one is delegate. And delegate is getting someone else involved. Document is creating a record of the incident. Delay is checking in with the individual to see if they're okay. And then the last one is direct, and that's speaking up in the moment when you see this behavior happening. So these are the 5Ds: distract, delegate, document, delay, and direct. Y'all still out there? Okay. Yep. Okay. Remember, y'all, I said like, comments. Good. Just making sure you're still here, right? So before we actually go and take a little deeper dive in what we can do when we see this type of behavior happening, is I really want to have a conversation about what's here on this slide, right? some common reasons that people don't act, right? And here's the thing, here's what I want you to hear and to understand, right? The idea in this is not to shame or blame, it is not to judge. It's to say yes and. And what I mean by that is, yes, I have this concern, which is true for me. And because I have this concern, how can I intervene when I see this happening that in a way that keeps me safe? How can I intervene when I see this happening in a way that keeps me safe and also support the person who's experiencing the behavior? So when I launched this poll and you answer, I would really like for you to think seriously about some concerns you have, because they are all valid and they're all true. So just bear with me for a second and get it. Oops. Okay, that's not good. 1 second. Oh, y'all see
Pulls
it?
up.
Okay,
It's
good.
up.
Okay. It's coming up really, really funky on my end. So that's why I'm like, is it showing? Is it not?
It looks good on my end.
Good. Okay. All right. So police are doing their jobs. I don't know what to do. I'm afraid I'll make things worse. Nobody's doing anything. I'm white and I don't want to look like a white savior, right? So answer honestly, because remember, again, the polls are anonymous. Nobody's going to see your response. Okay. Alrighty, so I'm going to share this. So first of all, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for answering and honoring your concerns. So thank you for that, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about some of those concerns. So some of the reasons that people don't act like in a poll is because they think the police are doing their jobs and they don't want to obstruct justice, or maybe they just don't know what to do, because that does happen. And that's why we have the 5Ds, because the 5Ds give you the tools to step up and to safely intervene given the situation, right? You might also think that you may make things worse. If you're concerned, you don't have to intervene directly. What you can do is use a more indirect method of intervention. And that could be simply something as asking for directions. You might also think that nobody else is doing anything, right? And this has a name. This kind of thinking is what we call the bystander effect, right? And there have been a lot of studies that have been done that show that people actually look around and wait for other people to act. So what we want to do is disrupt that cycle that allows a whole group of people to wait for someone else to act. You can do something like, hey, what's happening here, right? Other people might be thinking what you're thinking, right? But we don't want to continue to perpetuate the bystander effect. We want to intervene and do something. Those of you who say, I'm white, I don't want to look like a white savior. Well, first of all, I would challenge you to think about your reasons for intervening in the first place, because the goal of intervening, right, is to take care of the person who's experiencing the harassing behavior and to prioritize their needs. You are not there to save the day. You are not there to be heroic. You are there to take care of the person who's experiencing the harassment. And if you're able, you can check in with them and ask them what you can do to help. And then there may be those of us that have the concern, well, you know what? I don't really know what's going on. I don't think I have enough information. And that's like all the other ones, a valid concern. The reality is that when you think about it, we never really have the full context. We may not have been there, may not be there for the whole situation, right? So one of the things that we can do if we feel as though we need more information is maybe ask a simple question. Well, what did you mean by that? Or just saying something that you noticed, like they look uncomfortable, right? And then there's those of us that say, well, I'm scared it'll turn on me because I identify, right? Totally, absolutely, 100% valid. Definitely understand. So what you may want to think about is using an indirect form of intervention, like creating a distraction or maybe documenting the situation or asking someone else to help or maybe even checking in with the person afterwards. So the idea here is for us to honor, recognize the concerns that we have, and based on those, choose a method of intervening that keeps us safe, but also allows us to support the person who's experiencing the harassment. So I've said this word safety so many times, and it's really so important for you to understand that we are asking you to safely intervene, right? So when you intervene, right, prioritize your own safety. If you don't feel comfortable safely intervening, see if you can get someone else to help, right? Our 5Ds, our methodology is designed to help you avoid arrest, but know and understand, right? Things can escalate quickly. And it's important for you to know your rights. And this is information that we put in this slide that's directly from the ACLU, right? So police officers do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy when they're performing their jobs, but the people they are interacting with have privacy rights that would require you to notify them of the recording. So what you may want to do if you're documenting or recording is you may want to confirm with laws in your state because they do vary from state to state, right? If an officer orders you to stop recording or orders you to hand over your phone, you should politely tell the officer that you do not consent to doing so and remind the officer that taking photographs or video is your right under the First Amendment. Now, with that being said, be aware that some officers may arrest you for refusing to comply even though their orders are illegal. The arrest will be unlawful, but you need to weigh the personal risk of arrest against the value of continuing to record. Including officers' badge and patrol car numbers, which agency they're from, how many are present and what their names are, and any use of weapons or any injuries, right? You are able to do that. If you are able to speak to the person stopped by the police, leave. They might find your contact information helpful if they decide to pursue a complaint or file a lawsuit. So in summary with this slide, be mindful of your safety. Be mindful of the fact there are some things that you can do and it's your right to do, but be mindful that there are officers out there who may not follow that. And you really have to weigh the options of continuing or risking arrest. So let's go into more detail about the 5Ds. So this is the first D, distract, right? And distract, when you use this method, is where you can really start to get creative in what you do, right? You really don't need to understand or know who's in the right or wrong, but just being in a situation where you can sense that something is off. One way is to create a literal distraction, spill your drink, drop some change, right? Those are some ways you can do it, right? The idea behind distract is drawing attention away from the person. Now, in cases of police harassment or brutality, please hear this. We don't suggest distract because you can be arrested for obstruction of justice or become a target. The next one is delegate, and this is getting help from someone else. In a public space, this could look like maybe asking the person near you, or maybe finding a person in a position of authority, like maybe a bus driver, business owner, or cashier, and asking them for help, right? So when we talk about delegate, finding someone else, we are not saying call the police. Remember, this training is about police-sponsored violence, right? We know that there are Black and brown communities, right, that don't feel safe when the police are called. And if they're called, that the people or persons involved don't always feel like they're being cared for. In other words, we know that those interactions can go left very quickly, right? So for for instances of police harassment or brutality, you can report the incident to the Civilian Complaint Review Board, local commission on human rights, or get an attorney at the National Police Accountability Project. And some people have also chosen to delegate to the media. This has been a very powerful, powerful tool. All we're saying is that you check in with the person first who's experiencing a harassment before notifying or contacting the police, right? Cool? Cool. I know I'm dating myself with that word cool, right? Cool beans. I like that even better. Okay, great, great. Just making sure y'all still with me out there. Okay, right? So let's move on to our next D. Our next D.
Vanessa, before we move on, we do have a
Yes.
quick question in the chat.
Oh, sure.
If you'd like me to
Okay,
direct it to you.
Please
From
do.
Hillary, sure. So I'll read it to you.
Okay.
Can or should we ask the person who's experiencing the harassment if they want us to call someone that can be a support for them?
That's an excellent, I'm going to go back to that. Hold on, let me go back to the delegate. So what I'm hearing, instead, when you delegate, can you ask them if there's someone that you can call for them? Is that correct? Is that the question?
So the question was whether you should ask the person who's being harassed if they would like you to call someone that would be a good support system for them.
Actually, I think that's a great way to get help for that person. If you feel as though for you to be safe, you want to help and support that person. And the way that you can do that is by asking them if there's someone you can call that can come and support them. Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. That answer your question? Thank you, Marcella, for bringing that to my attention. And actually, in calling someone to help support that person, that actually falls under delegate and actually falls a little bit under delay too, which we haven't gotten to yet, but we will. So document, right? Document is a powerful tool, and we've seen the impact that it had in the George Floyd case specifically, right? Because there are a lot of instances where, Black or brown people haven't been believed, in what they say has happened to them, or has safely, been a flat out lie that has been told, right? So documenting can be a very powerful tool to show and to support what's happening, right? So we want to make sure, if this is the method that you choose, that you know your rights in doing this, or if you select this method. So first of all, you want to keep a safe distance, at least 6 feet, right? You don't need to try to hide the fact that you're recording, because like I said earlier, police officers are public officials, and your right to record is protected under the First Amendment as long as you're not obstructing justice. Police officers may not force you to quit filming, confiscate, or demand to view your photographs or video without a warrant, and they may not delete your photographs or video under any circumstances. So just a couple of more things with document. So first of all, want to make sure that someone else is doing something to help the person. So just a little bit more, right? So make sure someone else is doing something, right? You also want to make sure that with documenting or with the documentation, you want to give it to the person who's experienced the harassment and let them decide what to do with it, right? And why is this valuable? Because we all know we live in a digital age. When things happen, we find out about it yesterday, right? So for the person who's experienced the harassment, for them to actually see that situation or that incident on social media can be very traumatizing. And it almost can be like re-traumatizing that individual. So whatever documentation you take, you want to give it to that person and let them be the one to decide what happens with that information. And I think we already did some of these tips. Safe distance, 6 feet. Hold your phone, let me show you. Hold your phone horizontally. Y'all probably know how to record better than I do, right? Right, hold it steady for 10 seconds. Use slow and steady pans, right? Film details. Officers, if they're present, uniforms, badge numbers, license plates, if you can get them, street signs, landmarks, exteriors of buildings to help determine the location. And if your phone does not automatically record the date and time, please state that, date, time, location, right? And also another way to get that information is to turn GPS on your phone, which we all have, right? And if you're able to record everything, great. If you're not, just write down whatever it is that you are not able to record. Okay. So the last one is delay. And delay is really checking in with the person after the incident is over to make sure that they're okay. And this can look like a lot of different things. It could be, I saw what happened to you. That was really terrible. I'm sorry that happened to you. It could be, well, can I sit with you for a second? Can I take you somewhere? Or like with the question, who can I call that'll come and support you, right? Because here's the thing, with delay, what we're doing is that we are actually centering around this person who's experienced this behavior, and we want them to know that they have been cared for. So what I love about this one is that sometimes we kind of underestimate the impact and the power that we have just by going up to someone saying, are you okay? I saw that. Are you okay? That can be huge. And our last method is direct. One of the things before I go through this last D with you is I want to call your attention to is that of the 5 methods of intervention, only one, this one, direct, is saying to directly intervene by speaking up about the behavior when you see it or when it's happening, right? Only one of them requires you to say something to the person who's actually doing the behavior or creating the behavior. Only this one, right? So with that being said, direct, speaking up about the behavior when it's happening, right? You could say something like, what's on the slide here? Yeah, I know you're scared, but everybody deserves to be treated with respect. Or you could say something like, wow, that was kind of racist, or that was insensitive, or they look uncomfortable. Or you can ask a question, right? What did you mean by that? What crime was committed here? Why are you calling the police? But here's a couple of other things that I want you to be mindful of when using direct. We want to be mindful of our tone. We want to be mindful of our attitudes. And here's why. Because the whole idea behind bystander intervention is to de-escalate the situation, right? And if we go in there with a bad attitude or a unfriendly, I don't want to say unfriendly, but with an aggressive tone, what we may be doing is creating more to that situation that needs to be. So we want to be mindful of how we use direct. And I'm putting up both of my hands because I am a direct person. And I know this about myself, that I can be direct to the direct, so direct to the point that it may cause more harm than good, right? So the other thing I want to share with you about this is be mindful of using direct with the police, right? We be mindful when using direct with the police, because we're not asking you to be confrontational, right? Maintain a safe distance, and if you can, document. So, spent the last few minutes going through the 5Ds: distract, creating a distraction; delegate, getting someone else involved; document, creating a record; delay, checking in on the person; and direct, speaking up as their behavior is happening. So based on you, your identities, your privileges, maybe your vulnerabilities, I'm going to launch this next poll, and I'm going to ask you, you know, what D can you see yourself doing? What D do you feel is like, you know what, Vanessa, you went through all 5 of them, but I can actually see myself using whichever D it is. So give me an opportunity to launch this poll for you, and I'm hoping it's launched. Yep, it is. I see the responses. Okay, right? And understand and recognize, I'm not asking you to pick a D that you're going to use in every, that you're going to use in every situation. Just one that you can see yourself using maybe on a consistent basis. Because depending on the situation and depend on what's going on for you in that particular moment, that may change, right? Like I shared with you, I know I can be direct. I know I can be direct. So for me, I know the 1D that I can use is delay. I can support the person. I can check and make sure that they're okay. I can offer to maybe call someone for them. I know that that's the 1D that I can use. So I'm curious as to, for you, what it is that you can use. Okay, can you all see the results? I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay. Great. Right. Fabulous. So it looks like you've all picked all of the Ds. And here's another thing to keep in mind with the 5Ds, right? There's no right D, there's no wrong D. The right D is the one that works for you and the one that keeps you safe. That's the right D. Okay? All right. I can document. I use it because I have to use it every day. I have to use it every day because I'm brown and transgender. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. Okay. Good. All right. So now, how do we put this all into motion, right? Well, this is what I'd like for you to think about, right? So how do we move into being a bystander in action? How do we put this in motion? First of all, I want you to take a look at the scenario, right? Meaning looking at what's happening, right? And assess your safety, right? Assess your safety, right? Secondly, concerns. What concerns do you have about intervening? And hold them as true, being real and honest, right? Because how you see yourself and what your concerns are in that moment, that's what's going to help you determine which one of the Ds is going to work for you, right? So assess the situation and your safety. Notice your concerns about intervening and decide which one of the 5Ds works for you. Yeah? Okay. So now, y'all good? We good? Y'all still there? Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Let's see. I can be very direct, and that tends to get me and other people in trouble. So I have to heavily rely on delay. See, and I'm with you there because my directness is maybe a little bit too direct, right? So that's why I say for me, I know in any situation, I can use delay. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Okay, so y'all are still here, still here. Oh, I love the butterflies. Thank you. Thumbs up, see, thank you. And I love the hearts. Okay, great. That's too real. Okay, so thank you. All right. So now what we're going to spend the last couple of minutes of our training doing is actually looking at some scenarios, kind of to get you to thinking about if you were to come across a situation, what D you would actually use, right? So here we go. Here's the first one. A Black family is in the park having lunch. There are a good number or a good amount of people in the park. Two white couples go over to the Black family to tell them that they are not allowed to eat at the park and that they should leave. Meanwhile, you're noticing other non-Black families eating in the park. When the Black family refuses and ignores the group's request, one of the white women in the group threatens that she is going to call the police. So I'm going to launch a poll here. If you witness this, what would you do? And bear with me a second. Okay, it doesn't seem to want to let me get out of this poll. Second.
Do you want me to switch it
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah, could you please? Because it's for some reason, it's not letting me.
Here we go.
Okay, so thank you so much. Okay, so thank you. So what would you do? Document, pull out your phone and record it and share it to the police when they arrive. Delay, go to the Black family afterwards and tell them you saw what was happening and that it was unfair and it was wrong. Direct, tell them there's others here eating. I don't think it's up to you to tell them what to do. Give them some space or something else. And if you would choose something else, you can please feel free to put that in the chat box. Okay, so some of y'all said, no, we're gonna go up to these others. Okay, let's see, got a few. Some of you said document, no, I'm gonna record it. Something else, and while you all are answering this poll, one other thing I wanna share with you, I presented the Ds individually, right? Delay, document, direct, et cetera, et cetera. I presented them individually, but also know and recognize you can use, if you feel comfortable and safe, you can use more than one D in a situation, right? So I just wanted you to know that. So a lot of you in this case, right? Oh, let me share, right? Said, you know what? I am going to go to the family and tell them, look, there's other people eating here too. I don't think it's up to for you to tell them what they should or shouldn't do, right? And a lot of you said, you know what? I'm going to record this. And some of you said, you know, I'm just going to wait till it's over and I'm going to check in with that family and make sure that they're okay. And a couple of you picked something else. So I'm curious to see what you put in the chat box. Okay, I indicated something else because I have the inclination to be direct here, but probably only if I have a more outgoing friend with me. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thank you for that. Maybe go up and ask them why they're calling the police. Yeah, great. Great. So thank you all. All right. So let's move on to the next one. Okay. You're outside your house waiting on a package. You notice the delivery guy, who happens to be Black, is held up a few houses down because he is being questioned by a tenant and a super about why he was in the building. He tells them, I was making a delivery. They ask him where, and to preserve his client's privacy, he says, I can't tell you that. They continue to question him and start to make suggestions that he was stealing. The driver is pleading with them that he wasn't and asks them to please let him continue on his route, but they are blocking his way. So our next poll, and let's see if I have better luck in launching this one. Let's see. Okay. Let me see. Okay, do y'all see it? Okay. All right, good. Distract, walk up and say, hey, I'm waiting for a package. Can you see if you have it? Right? Kind of ease the tension there, right? Direct. Go up to the tenant and super say, hey, come on now. He's doing his job. You're doing too much, right? Delay, wait till he gets to your building and say, hey, I saw what happened and I thought it was unacceptable. Are you okay? Or something else. Okay. So a lot of you seem to like that first one, right? Okay, so let me see. Okay, give y'all another few minutes for that. Okay. And poll share, right? So in this case, a lot of you said, no, you know what? I can use distract here. And basically, I'm just going to go up and say, hey, I'm waiting for a package. Can you check to see if it's there? And some of you said, no, I'm going to go to them and say, you're doing too much. Let this man go about his work, right? So I think it's wonderful. And this is what I like is that when you're looking at these choices and options, right, taking everything into consideration, taking in your safety, taking in maybe how you identify in that situation, right? And picking the D's that work for you, right? So thank you. And we have another poll, right? You're at the deli and you're waiting for a sandwich to be made. You notice a Black patron comes in, purchases a drink, and then leaves. He stands outside. He stands out front to take a rest and take a sip of his drink when 4 officers rush him and pin him to the ground. He says, what is going on? Why are you doing this? I didn't do anything. The police argue that he was trying to steal from the store. He says, no, I am not. What are you talking about? Ask the store clerk. Please get off me. The cops then draw their guns and he exclaims, please don't shoot. So if you witness this, what would you do? Right? And let me see. Okay, so y'all already had the poll up. Okay. Okay, that works, right? And I like a couple of you said all of the above. And right, this is what I was talking about earlier when I said we can use a combination of the Ds, we can use all of the Ds, we could use one D, right? So some of you said, I'm going to do everything that's listed. I'm going to do A, B, and C, right? Some of you said, I'm going to say something to the officer. Some of you said, nope, I'm going to record it. Some of you said, I'm going to delegate. I'm going to file a complaint and I'm going to notify local public advocate. So let me just share this with you all so you can see it, right? So I love that. Great. Okay. All righty. So let me see what I have here because I realized I didn't read the comments. Oh yes, all of the above, but mainly direct. Okay. Direct and document and direct. It's really helpful for me to hear examples of distracting because I'm so inclined to be head on in every situation. And that is often not the best way to intervene. It's possible. And that's a very, first of all, thank you for that transparency and that honesty and that comment, being able to understand and know who we are. And if we know that we are head on, that by us directly intervening, that we could maybe cause or escalate that situation, then yes, in that case, it's absolutely better to maybe look at one of the other Ds, right? Because again, the idea is that we want to de-escalate and we want to support the person. We don't want to escalate that situation and make it worse than what it already is, right? Okay. Great. Okay, so let's go on to our next one. So you witness a Black teenager being followed around your favorite store by a sales associate. There are other teens in there, but the sales associate only follows the Black one. So if you saw that, what would you do? Okay, let's see. There we go. All right, what would you do? Delegate, tell the store manager what you witnessed and ask them what they're doing to address racial profiling. Delegate and document. Pretend to check your email or while you record the situation, then tell the manager and give the recording to the teenager as proof and encourage them to file a complaint. Distract. Go up to the sales associate and ask for help looking for something or something else. Okay. All righty, gonna give you another few minutes. Okay, I'm gonna share this. So, oops, there we go. I think we can share it now. Okay, there you go. So a lot of you, I think the first three, it looks like it's pretty good, right? Between what you all would do, right? And thank you, this is great. And I just want to check out some comments in the chat here. Either delegate and distract or document and delegate. Okay, thank you for that. Delegate and delay. I honestly can't find my camera when I need it. Okay, right? So you can delegate, right? There we go. Let me see. I feel we see this all the time. What have you done? Are you asking me what I've done when I've seen that, or are you just asking the question in general? So I'm not clear there. Okay. Check in. Oh, let me see. We all see this often. Well, I'll share a story that happened to me. I think we got like 2 minutes before we get to the last question. If y'all want to hear it, if you want to say it, I've got to see like 200 yeses in the comments. Okay. All right. So y'all okay. So like, love stories. Okay. So this was a couple of years ago. As you can see now, my hair is short. About 3 years ago, I had locks that pretty much, I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing, but they came past my shoulders. They were very long. So a lot of hair care products. And I remember going into this one store trying to, what I was looking to do is change the product I was using. So I was going through the aisles, reading labels, and I noticed everywhere I went, there seemed to be salesperson was behind me. Now, the first time it happened, they were like, "Oh, may I help you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just browsing," because I wasn't really clear on what I was looking for. So I didn't need help. So anyway, long story short, about 6 aisles, and every time I moved the aisle, this person moved the aisle too. So finally, what I did, and then I realized, oh, they're following me in the store. They're following me around in the store. So, well, first thing is I did not buy anything from there. Number one, I did not buy anything from there. And I went up to her. And first I had to take a woosah moment. Let me say that. I had to take a woosah moment. Went up to her and I said, it seems every aisle I go in, you're here. Why? It seems like you're following me around the store. And she says, "No, I'm not following you around." So meanwhile, there are other people in the store. I just want to make that clear. There are other people in the store. And I said, "Well, that's what it seems like to me." I said, "There's other people in the store and you seem to be focused on me." And she says, "No, that's not. I just wanted to make sure you found what you were looking for." "Well, I don't know what I'm looking for. So you're assuring that I find it is not helping me." And I said, "I don't believe you. I do think you were following me because I'm Black, and I will not be purchasing anything from the store, nor will I come back to the store. And not only that, I also put it on social media." Right. So that's how I handled the situation. Now, inside, like I said, I'm a direct person. So before I could approach that person, I had to take a step back. I had to take a minute to kind of come back, because if I had approached her in the mood that I was in that second, it totally would have went another way. Right. Yes, and I remember that video that the referee cut the locks. Yeah. Mine was done by choice, right? Mine was done by choice. I cut mine by choice, right? Very good to handle it. Yeah. So Thank you. Thank you. I see the hand claps. So, okay. So this brings us actually to our last poll question. So everything we talked about today, right? The 5Ds, you know, getting a little bit of understanding about how this impacts these communities and even talking about how it shows up, right? Is there at least one thing, right? If you saw this type of behavior happening, if you saw police sponsored violence and racial harassment happening, do you think there's at least one thing that you could do? Okay. And I am going to share this because the majority of you said yes. Um, that yes, there is one thing that I feel as though that I could do if I saw this. And for those of you that said no, you know, there were a few people that said no. And the whole idea behind this presentation is for you to feel safe when you intervene, right? So I thank you all for your honesty. I thank you for participating. And I thank you for sharing this space with me in the conference. So yeah, so you can find out more about the organization as our website. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Right? So I want to say thank you and namaste. Be safe, be healthy, and be you.